My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole over $200, $0 from our joint account to pay for their wedding, and now she's claiming I'm the one who's in the wrong during the court battle over our house and inheritance. I can't believe I trusted her. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this story about betrayal and heartbreak, but here I am. It all started with what seemed like small signs, little things that, in hindsight, should have tipped me off earlier. My wife, Emily, was always a bit of a bitch about money, but she could also be charming and sweet when she wanted to be. We'd been married for 8 years, and honestly, I thought we had a pretty good thing going. She was beautiful, smart, and seemed to genuinely love me, or at least, that's what I convinced myself of. But then, the cracks started showing. She began coming home later than usual, claiming work was piling up or she had to meet with her boss, Richard. At first, I didn't think much of it. She's a marketing executive, and her job often involves late nights and dinners with clients. Still, I noticed her phone becoming more secretive. She'd always keep it face down, even when we were watching TV. She'd get defensive if I asked to see her messages, brushing it off with a tight smile. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I felt something was off. One night, I decided to check her phone when she was in the shower. I know, probably not the best move, but I was desperate. I didn't expect to find what I did, messages from Richard, flirtatious and intimate, talking about how much they enjoyed their time together, and planning a trip to some fancy resort. There were photos, too, her in lingerie, seducing him in ways that made my stomach turn. That was the moment I realized everything was a lie. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was actively sneaking around, stealing from us and lying through her teeth. It hit me like a freight train. I felt sick, angry, and betrayed all at once. How could she do this? We had a life together, a house, savings, a future. And she was out there screwing her boss, planning a wedding with him and stealing from our joint account to pay for it. Over $200, $0 gone, money we'd saved for years for our kids' college fund, for our retirement. I couldn't believe she'd do something so reckless, so destructive. I had always thought she was ambitious, maybe a little bitchy, but I never thought she'd be capable of screwing me over like this. The next couple of days were a blur. I started digging through our bank statements, looking for any other signs of her treachery, and sure enough, I found more. Large transfers to some offshore account, charges at hotels I'd never heard of, and a suspicious wire transfer just a week before I found the messages. It was clear she'd been planning this for months. She had the audacity to lie to my face, pretend everything was fine, and then sneak around behind my back. I felt numb, then furious. How could she be so cold, so manipulative? I wanted to scream at her, to shake her and demand answers, but I knew I had to stay calm. I needed to think. That night I confronted her. I sat her down in our living room, trying to keep my voice steady, but inside I was boiling over. I told her I knew about Richard, about the affair, about the money she'd stolen. Her face twisted into this bitchy smirk, like she thought she could just play it off. She denied everything at first, claiming I was crazy, paranoid, that I was imagining things. Then I showed her the messages, the bank records, the evidence I'd collected. Her eyes widened for a second, then she started lying even more, saying Richard was just a business acquaintance, that she never cheated, never stole a dime, and that I was just jealous or insecure. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't believe her lies. I knew her better than that. I knew when she was lying. She was good at it, though, bitchy, manipulative, and cold. She told me I was overreacting, that I was ruining her career and her reputation. She said it was just sex, that Richard meant nothing, that she was going to leave me and start fresh with him. That's when I realized I was dealing with a person who had no shame, no remorse. It was like talking to a wall. She'd lie until she was blue in the face, convinced she could get away with it. I was devastated. I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this, where someone I loved and trusted would betray me so profoundly. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I spent days just staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened, trying to make sense of how my wife, my partner, could do this to me. The anger simmered beneath the surface, but I also felt a deep sadness for what we had lost, for the years of trust and love that she'd thrown away. I kept asking myself, how did it get this far? How did I miss the signs? And most of all, how do I get out of this mess without losing everything I worked for? After I confronted her that night, everything changed. Emily, my wife, became even more bitchy and defiant. She insisted she was innocent, that I was just insecure and paranoid. She kept throwing around words like crazy, jealous, and possessive, trying to turn the tables on me. It was infuriating. She denied the affair, denied stealing anything, and accused me of ruining her career and her reputation. Honestly, I was too angry to argue rationally at first. All I could think about was the betrayal, the money she'd taken, and how she was trying to gaslight me into doubting myself. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind was racing. What do I do now? I knew I had to act fast, but I also needed to keep my head clear. I decided to hire a private investigator. I needed concrete proof of her affair, her theft, and her lies. I couldn't just rely on my gut anymore. I wanted to catch her in the act if I could, or at least get enough evidence to confront her again with everything laid out on the table. While I was setting up the pie, I started digging into our finances more thoroughly. I pulled all our bank statements, credit card records, and online transaction histories. That's when I discovered the full extent of her deception. Over $200, $0 had been drained from our joint account, money we'd saved for years. She transferred it to some offshore account, paid for her wedding with Richard, and even bought a new luxury car with the stolen cash. I couldn't believe she'd be so reckless and selfish. How could she think she could get away with this? How could she betray me, our family, like that? The pie got back to me a few days later. Turns out, Emily had been sneaking around with Richard for months. They'd been meeting in secret hotels, sometimes even in our own city. The pie had photos and videos, proof that she was sleeping with her boss. The evidence was damning. I felt a mixture of relief and rage. Relief because I finally had proof, and rage because she'd taken everything from us, our savings, our trust, and our dignity. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with everything laid bare. When I brought her the evidence, her reaction was even more contemptible. She looked at the photos, the bank records, and then just shrugged. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Richard and I are in love. I'm leaving. You're just too insecure to see it." She accused me of being controlling, of holding her back, and claimed she was doing what made her happy. She told me I was a terrible husband, a terrible man, and that she'd never loved me the way I thought she did. That's when I realized she was completely detached from reality, and that she'd been planning this whole thing for a long time. I felt numb again, but inside I was boiling. I couldn't believe I'd trusted her for so long. I'd always been the stable one, working hard, providing for us, trying to keep everything together. And she was out there, screwing her boss and stealing from us, all while pretending everything was fine. I started questioning everything I believed about her, about us. How could someone be so manipulative, so calculating? I was furious at her, but also heartbroken. I'd lost my wife, my partner, my best friend. I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. Meanwhile, I knew I had to make decisions, fast. I couldn't keep living in this chaos. I started talking to a lawyer about the divorce, about protecting what was left of our assets, and about the legal fight over the house and inheritance. The more I dug into her lies, the more I realized how deep her betrayal ran. She was trying to spin it in court, claiming I was the one at fault, that I'd been emotionally abusive and controlling. She even accused me of cheating, which was just a part of her desperate attempt to shift blame. It was a lot to process, but I knew I couldn't let her manipulate the situation. I had the evidence, I had the truth, and I was determined to get justice. The hardest part was accepting that I was probably going to lose her, not just the marriage, but the woman I thought I knew. It's a brutal lesson in trust and betrayal, and I still can't believe I was so blind for so long. The pain cuts deep, but I keep reminding myself that I deserve better. I deserve someone who won't lie, cheat, and steal from me. The journey ahead is going to be tough, but I'm ready to fight for what's right, myself, my dignity, and whatever remains of what we built together. After I gathered all the evidence and prepared myself mentally, I decided to confront Emily one last time before taking legal action. I knew I had to be strategic, show her I wasn't going to be played anymore, that I had the upper hand with all the damning proof. The day I scheduled the meeting, I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and a sense of clarity I'd never experienced before. It was like I finally saw her for what she truly was, not just the woman I married, but the manipulative, selfish person she'd become. She showed up at the house that evening, wearing her usual bitchy smirk, acting like she still had all the power. She tried to throw her usual tantrums, accusing me of stalking her, claiming I was trying to ruin her career, and insisting she was the victim here. But I had enough. I laid out everything: photos, bank statements, offshore account details, the wire transfers, the texts, everything. I watched her face change from smugness to shock, then to outright panic. She stuttered, tried to deny, but the evidence was overwhelming. She finally broke down, her voice trembling, trying to make excuses. "It's not what it looks like," she said, her tone defensive. "Richard and I are in love. I was going to tell you eventually. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I couldn't keep pretending everything was perfect anymore." She cried, but it felt hollow. I knew she was just trying to manipulate me again to make me feel guilty. I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her she was a liar, a thief, and a manipulator, that I'd had enough of her games. My mind was racing. I knew I had to act fast. I called my lawyer right then and there, giving her the evidence and telling her what had happened. I wanted to file for divorce immediately, but I also wanted to protect what was ours: our house, our savings, everything she had tried to steal from us. Meanwhile, I started thinking about the upcoming court battles, the fight over inheritance, and how she was trying to twist everything to her favor. I could see her trying to spin her lies in court, claiming I was abusive or controlling. Classic move. The next few days were a whirlwind. I met with my lawyer, who advised me to get a forensic accountant involved, someone who could trace the stolen money, uncover all her hidden accounts, and prepare for the legal fights ahead. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to run or hide assets. I felt like I was in a war I couldn't see fully, but I was determined to come out on top. I couldn't believe how much damage she'd done, how much she'd betrayed everything we built. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her act, trying to manipulate friends and family, spinning stories about how I was the bad guy. She was bitchy and dismissive, claiming she was the victim of my controlling ways and that Richard was just a good friend who helped her find her happiness. She insisted she loved Richard and was leaving me because I was holding her back. The audacity. She told anyone who'd listen that I was abusive, that I was jealous and paranoid, and that she was the real victim here. It was infuriating to see her lie so blatantly, but I knew I had the evidence to shut her down. The court case loomed closer. I felt a lot of anxiety about losing my home, my savings, and maybe even custody of our kids if she decided to go that route. But I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally taking control, finally fighting back. I realized how much she'd manipulated me, how much she'd lied, and how deeply she'd betrayed me. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with so much for so long. But I also knew I couldn't carry this weight forever. I had to stand up for myself, for what was right. One thing I learned is that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. And sometimes, the person you think you know isn't the person they pretend to be. I used to think Emily was a strong, ambitious woman. Now I see her as someone who's willing to steal, cheat, and lie just to get what she wants. It's a hard lesson, but a necessary one. I'm still hurting, still processing everything, but I know I'll come out of this stronger. I won't let her destroy what's left of my life with her lies. I'll fight for my share, for my dignity, and for the peace I deserve. The court date finally arrived, and I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Everything was happening so quickly: lawyers, paperwork, depositions, and I could see Emily's bitchy attitude shining through even more. She was trying to act like the victim, claiming I was a controlling psycho who had somehow ruined her life. She spun her lies in court, saying I was emotionally abusive, that I'd been cheating on her, even though I had all the proof of her affair and theft. The judge looked at her with a mix of skepticism and disapproval, but I knew she was trying to sway things in her favor. I sat there, feeling like I was in a nightmare. I presented all the evidence, texts, bank statements, the offshore account info, the private investigators' reports. My lawyer was sharp and relentless, pointing out every lie Emily tried to tell. I could see her trying to manipulate the court, but the damning evidence was too much. I felt a flicker of hope that I might finally get some justice. But I also knew Emily's type. She was cunning and would do anything to save herself, even if it meant lying her way out of it. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her bitchy attitude, sneering at me. When she thought I wasn't looking, she kept claiming she was leaving me because I was toxic, that I'd never really loved her, and that Richard was her soulmate. She insisted the money she took was for their wedding, which she claimed was just a small private ceremony, even though I had proof of the lavish hotel bookings and jewelry she bought with our stolen cash. She even accused me of plotting against her, trying to turn everyone in her favor, including family and friends. It was disgusting to see her so manipulative, so cold. During the hearing, the judge asked about the house, the inheritance, and the money. I explained everything, how she'd stolen from us, how she'd been planning this all along, and how she'd lied to my face for years. I could see Emily's face tighten when I mentioned the offshore accounts and the payments for her wedding. She tried to deny everything, but my lawyer refuted her with the evidence. I felt a strange mix of relief and fury. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, proof that she was a liar and a thief. After the hearing, the judge made some preliminary rulings. She ordered Emily to return the stolen money, or at least a significant portion of it, and to give us full access to the house. The judge also warned Emily that her lies and manipulations could backfire badly if she continued. I knew this was just the beginning, but it was a step in the right direction. I felt a slight sense of victory, but I also knew Emily wouldn't go down without a fight. She was already plotting her next move, I could tell. In the aftermath, I felt exhausted but relieved. I had finally laid out all the truth for everyone to see. I felt vindicated, even if I was still hurting inside. I'd lost my wife, my partner, and a lot of the trust I'd once had, but I was gaining clarity. I realized how much I'd been blind, trusting her blindly, ignoring the warning signs, hoping she'd change. But she proved she was a master manipulator, willing to do anything to get her way, cheat, steal, lie, and now try to smear me in court. I started focusing on rebuilding myself. I hired a financial advisor to help me recover what I could from the stolen money, and I began the process of divorce. It wasn't easy seeing her face in court, knowing she'd betrayed me so deeply, but I knew I had to move on. The betrayal cut like a knife, but I also saw it as a wake-up call. No more trusting blindly. No more ignoring red flags. I've learned that sometimes the person you love the most can turn into the person you least recognize. And that lesson, harsh as it was, is one I won't forget anytime soon. The divorce proceedings dragged on for months, and every day felt like a battle I wasn't fully prepared for. Emily was relentless, bitchy, manipulative, and always trying to turn the court's sympathy her way. She insisted she was the victim, claiming I'd been emotionally abusive, controlling, and even cheating on her, so she could justify her theft and her affair with Richard. Honestly, I was tired of her lies, but I knew I had to stay strong, keep my evidence ready, and keep my focus on what mattered, getting justice and moving forward. Throughout this period, I kept thinking about how she'd managed to manipulate everyone around her. She told friends I was a monster, that I'd been trying to control her life and that she was just a victim of my abuse. I had to hold back my anger every time I heard her spinning her stories. I knew the truth, and I knew the court would see through her lies eventually. Still, it was frustrating watching her act like the victim when she was the one who'd betrayed us all, stolen from me, cheated on me, and lied to everyone. Meanwhile, I worked closely with my lawyer to protect what was left of our assets. We filed motions to recover the stolen money, and I pushed for full custody of our kids, knowing Emily's manipulative nature. I also started seeing a counselor, something I'd avoided for years, to help process everything. The betrayal had shaken me to my core. I'd trusted her with everything, our life, our future, and she'd thrown it all away for Richard and her own selfish needs. It felt like I was losing part of myself, but I knew I had to keep fighting. One of the hardest moments came during a court hearing when Emily, with her bitchy smirk, tried to claim I'd been emotionally abusive toward her. She produced fake evidence of supposed incidents, trying to paint me as the villain. I was furious. She was just desperate to win in any way she could. My lawyer destroyed her testimony with the real evidence, texts, emails, witnesses, and I watched her face fall, realizing her lies weren't going to hold up. It was a small victory, but it felt good to see her cornered. But the worst part was seeing the toll it took on our kids. Emily kept spinning stories to them, making me out to be the bad guy, trying to turn them against me. I hated seeing how she manipulated their perceptions, but I stayed quiet for their sake. I knew the court would see through her, and I just hoped that in the end the truth would come out for my kids' sake. I wanted to be there for them, to rebuild some semblance of normalcy, but I knew the scars of her betrayal would linger for a long time. As the months wore on, I started to accept that I might lose a lot: my marriage, my savings, even the house. But I also realized I gained something valuable: clarity. I saw Emily for who she really was, and I understood that I couldn't rebuild trust with someone so manipulative and selfish. I'd been blinded by love and loyalty, but now I saw her for what she was: a liar, a thief, and a user. That realization gave me the strength to keep fighting, to stand up for myself and for what I deserved. Looking back, I can say that this experience has taught me some harsh lessons about trust, betrayal, and resilience. I've learned that people can hide their true nature for a long time, and that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to cut out the toxicity completely. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I will never let anyone manipulate or betray me like that again. I'm slowly rebuilding my life, piece by piece, and I refuse to let her betrayal define me. The road ahead is uncertain, but I'm determined to come out stronger, wiser, and more cautious than ever before. The final court hearing was the culmination of everything I'd been fighting for. After months of lies, manipulations, and legal battles, I finally felt like I was starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Emily's attempts to spin her stories and paint herself as the victim had failed miserably. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence, her texts, bank records, witness statements, made a clear ruling. She ordered Emily to return the remaining stolen funds, awarded me primary custody of the kids, and granted me our house. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was enough. I felt a strange mixture of relief, exhaustion, and a deep sense of justice. Walking out of that courtroom, I realized how much I'd changed. I'd gone from trusting blindly and loving unconditionally to being cautious, guarded, and fiercely protective of what's mine. Emily's betrayal had shattered my illusions about love and loyalty, but it also opened my eyes to the importance of self-respect and boundaries. I learned that some people are just willing to do whatever it takes to get what they want, regardless of who they hurt. And I learned that sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to fight with everything you've got, even if it costs you everything you once held dear. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding myself. I reconnected with friends and family who had supported me through the chaos. I found a new job that paid better and gave me a fresh start. I started therapy to process the pain and betrayal, and slowly, I began to forgive myself for trusting her for so long. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing her actions. It was about freeing myself from the anger and resentment that had been eating me alive. I realized I deserved peace and happiness, even if it meant starting over alone. Looking back, I can honestly say that the biggest lesson I learned is that trust is fragile, something you have to earn and protect every day. I also learned that revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming your dignity and standing up for yourself. Emily's actions might have broken my heart, but they didn't break my spirit. I refuse to let her define my future. Instead, I choose to move forward, wiser and more cautious, knowing that I am stronger than I ever thought I could be. Now I'm focused on building a new life, one rooted in honesty, respect, and self-worth. I've come to accept that some chapters end painfully, but new ones can be even better if you learn from your mistakes. I know I'll always carry the scars of her betrayal, but I also know I won't let them define me. The past has taught me that I am capable of surviving even the worst kind of betrayal, and that I deserve someone who values me for who I am, not for what I can give or hide. I'm finally at peace with myself, and that's the best revenge of all.